how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood from YouTube back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. This is episode 122 I am reviewing, written by Ron Sproat, directed by Leva Swift. So, this episode picks up where the previous one left off. We see Matthew and David in the old house. Matthew is reassuring David, you're not going to go to jail. No one's going to know you helped me. I'm not going to tell nobody. You can't get in any trouble. The sheriff's just talk. That's lawyer talk. Reassuring anyway that David is is not going to get in any trouble. So this is also sort of the start where David begins to suspect that uh, that Matthew has Vicky. He heard a noise behind the fake wall. He thought it was a ghost. Again, he heard the noise. He did tell Matthew he thought it was a ghost, but deep down, David is doubting what Matthew is saying very much. Basically, David suspects Vicky is behind the wall, behind the bookshelf, if you will. So David leaves. Matthew, by the way, Matthew is aware there's like a couple of the sheriff's men out there searching the grounds. There's like only two. Um, it's crazy because this story somehow takes place the next day. The way Carolyn talks, that it's the next day. Morning has come, if you will. And this day does not last long either because we're going to see, obviously, nighttime. But first, we see the lovely Carolyn Collins' daughter, Nancy Barrett, is in this episode. She is her and Burke have a telephone conversation. Burke is asking any information about Victoria Winters. Carolyn is the one interested in Burke, but Carolyn is kind of the realization that Burke is maybe more interested in Vicky than what she realizes. You also have one of my favorite two character conversations, and it's Carolyn and David. I actually prefer the conversation with Carolyn and David in this episode. It happens in the drawing room. David comes back from the old house, and they're having a conversation about Matthew. David says Matthew wouldn't hurt Vicky. My dad murdered Bill Malloy. And Carolyn's kind of shaking her head like, David, you are really a morbid kid if you think that your dad has killed Bill Malloy and would hurt Victoria Winters. Now, how do you explain the stone thing falling on off the old house? Matthew pushed it. He tried to kill her, but that was an accident. David is kind of doubting. He's telling himself this more so than he is Carolyn, it feels like. I love the next style because you have Carolyn grab David by the arms, and it's not forcefully, she's just getting his attention because Matthew will kill Victoria Winters. And before that, she says, you better, she's probably laying somewhere in a ditch dead because Matthew killed her. And David gets up and says, don't say that. And that's when she turns and grabs him and says, Matthew has most likely, you better get used to that because if Matthew does have her, Vicky's probably dead. And usually, you get the more talk from David, but you've been really hearing it from the adults. You've heard it from Mrs. Johnson. You've heard it from Carolyn. The sheriff has kind of danced around it a bit. So you're not hearing it as much from David. Is this a character reform or change? It's pulling back again. David thinks his dad murdered Bill Malloy, but is his mind going to get changed? So he also they're pulling some of that back to give David an out for to be able to tell Burke about Vicky because he doesn't want to go to jail. He doesn't want it sent away. Again, some of David's fear, you can kind of tell the way David Hennessy's blocking is still there. Because he again doesn't like his dog. So, but I like what they're doing. They're making David a little more kid than just some monster, than just some little monsters carrying. I mean, he still is somewhat that, but he's not as much of that as he was. So he's kind of undergoing a character change a bit here. A little bit, not a whole lot. It's not like a big leap and bound. It's I think really what Ron Sproul, Malcolm Marmstein are doing here as writers, they're trying to show in a weird about way that Vicky kind of has somewhat reached David to a degree. I think that's what the writers are trying to do by this point. Because again, you're gonna get the setup for war eventually here very soon. So you kind of need to make David a little more human slash sympathetic toward your audience if we're going to have a very heavy antagonist show up here and try to kill this kid. So I think the writers are aware and try to make this work. Apologies, and they are making it work. So David leaves the great house. He goes to Burke's hotel room. Burke is sort of in these pajamas. It looks like he's ready for a nap. He was on the phone. He's looking for Blair. He wants to hire a private investigator. David knocks on his hotel room. Burke asks who it is. And he comes in. And this is sort of where you see a kind of a shift in Burke tutoring to, where Burke was so gung-ho, accusing Roger of everything because he knows Roger was the one who killed the guy in the manslaughter case 10 years ago. What you see Burke pull back on is Burke knows that Roger did not kill him. So he knows it's not the case. But he does tell David, look, if you want to consider those a possibility, you're not stop him. But he doesn't fully commit in saying Roger could have killed the Blair. He doesn't commit to that. And that lack of committal causes David to sort of look at Burke and I thought you were different, and I thought you were a lot different than people. You treated me a certain way, but he feels that now Burke isn't. Burke is receiving a phone call now from Blair and David. David leaves, and I like what the camera does here. You don't see David leave, and Burke tells Blair, "I want a private investigator up there. I want him, looking into everything um, about Vicky's whereabouts." Leaves. We're back at the old house. Matthew and Vicky are very tired. It's dark, and as they go to sleep, you hear the ghostly voice of Josette Collins. This startles Matthew. He gets up out of the cot. They're behind the bookcase, and you see him and hear him. Who's saying that? And his loud voice, because again, it's just a small room, startles Vicky. He's like, look at what you talk about. And she goes, "You heard that voice? You heard that voice?" "No, I didn't hear anything." She didn't. And he goes out there and he leaves the bookcase. He comes out to the drawing room, and again he hears his name being called. Um, and he says, "Who's calling my name? Who's calling my name?" It's me, Josette Collins. No, no. And he goes back in. He unties Vicky. And he says, "You heard the voices. You heard those, right? You heard the voice." And no, no, I didn't hear. And then Vicky says, "Well, then I did believe you." She tries to lie. She says, "No, you don't. You think I'm crazy." Um, it makes no sense to hear a voice unless you are a crazy man. And it goes, so is Matthew crazy? Really, Josette is driving him crazy. They're going to do some things. So, really great effects, great episode. But I got to give a lot of credit. I got to give David Hennessy a lot of credit. I got to give Nancy Barrett a lot of credit. Their chemistry was through the roof. It was great. I love Mitchell Ryan's little scenes with David Hennessy. David Hennessy really shines in any episodes he's in. And I love, but the person who ultimately steals this episode, I gotta give to Fair David. Uh, those scenes acting out being scared were really brilliant. And I love how Alexander gets to play this too. Really, really well written. Ron Strode is a genius. Great, great episode. Link to this episode will be in the description box, guys. I hope you have a great night and take care.